I came home earlier than anyone expected. No calls, no messages, just a quiet decision to surprise my family before Christmas Eve. The house was glowing like a jewel under the winter sky. Warm lights flickered across the garden. Laughter drifted through the windows, and for a moment, I thought I was stepping back into happiness, but joy has a strange way of disguising sorrow. Left my suitcase by the door and stood still, listening. From the living room came the clinking of glasses and a man's voice making a toast. My son's voice. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. I should have smiled. But something in his tone, confident, rehearsed, tightened my chest. Through the open balcony doors, I saw her. My wife, Helen. She sat alone by the tree, her face turned away from the laughter, a glass of wine trembling in her hand. The soft golden lights reflected off her tears. Nobody noticed her. Nobody noticed me. I stayed hidden, frozen by the sound of my own family celebrating a life that suddenly felt unfamiliar. And in that silence, realization crept in, not through words, but through absence. My name is Daniel Ross. I'm 61 years old. For nearly 3 decades, I built my name brick by brick. A line of coastal resorts across the Carolinas, once mocked as impossible dreams. Today, they're worth over $40 million. But behind every success, there's a price. And mine was time. I thought I was buying for my family. Helen and I built everything together. She managed reception desks when we couldn't afford staff. She smiled through exhaustion when the first resort nearly bankrupted us. We survived. We grew. We thrived. And then came Ethan, our only son. Bright, ambitious, and spoiled by comfort he didn't earn. He studied architecture but rarely practiced. Always one excuse or another. The market's slow. The client's too demanding, the timing never right. Then, 4 years ago, he married Lydia, a woman from New York whose beauty could silence a room and whose entitlement could drain it just as fast. After that, everything changed. Ethan's visits became rare. Calls shorter and conversations colder. Money replaced affection. "Dad," he'd say, "it's not like that. Lydia just wants the kids to be near her parents. You understand, right?" I understood too well. Month after month, I sent him money, rent, travel, emergency loans. Helen didn't argue. She only smiled sadly and said, "He's our son." But the laughter I heard tonight, it didn't sound like family. It sounded like strangers celebrating ownership of something that wasn't theirs. Through the window, I saw Lydia's parents sitting comfortably on my sofa, sipping my wine as if they belonged there. My son smiling beside them, raising his glass higher, and then Lydia's voice sharp, careless. Finally, this house feels alive. So much better without Daniel's constant rules. Helen flinched. No one comforted her. That single moment, her silence against their joy, was the beginning of my awakening. I didn't need to hear more to understand that something sacred had shifted. They were guests in my home. They were invaders wearing smiles. But before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand how betrayal doesn't start with a knife. It starts with neglect, with trust taken for granted, with love mistaken for weakness. I had spent my life building walls to protect my family from the world. I never imagined I'd need to build them to protect my family self. That night, standing in the shadows of my own living room, watching my wife cry while my son toasted my absence, I made a silent promise. This wouldn't end with tears, that it would end with truth. By dawn, I'd already made my choice. But revenge, when done right, isn't loud. It's quiet, deliberate, and patient. And I had all three. By dawn, my decision was made. But revenge, I've learned, isn't an explosion. It's a tide. It rises quietly, pulls everything it touches, and when it retreats, nothing is left standing. That night, I didn't confront them. I simply watched. Observed the rhythm of their voices, the careless laughter. The way Lydia's father called my house a property with potential. Those 4 words told me everything. I waited until their celebration faded into the hum of background music and distant chatter, then slipped out through the side garden. Helen was still on the balcony, staring at the tree lights. Her hands trembled around her empty glass. When she finally turned and saw me, her lips parted in disbelief. Daniel? I placed my finger on my lips. Don't say a word. Come with me. We moved through the shadows like ghosts, two intruders in a home that once was ours. Out by the car, her tears broke free. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. They've been here for weeks, Ethan said they wanted a family Christmas. But it's not family, Daniel. It's something else. Tell me everything. And she did. For 3 weeks, Ethan and Lydia had slowly taken over the house. What began as a visit turned into an occupation. They'd moved their things into the master bedroom, claimed the guest rooms for their in-laws, and started discussing inheritance planning at the dinner table like I was already gone. They told me it's better to transfer ownership now, Helen said, to avoid estate taxes. They said it's just paperwork, that you'd understand. Her voice cracked, but I knew. I knew it wasn't about taxes. I held her hand, steady and firm. You did the right thing by not signing anything. I tried to stall, she said, but they pushed harder every day. Lydia's mother even brought a lawyer yesterday. They have documents, Daniel, ready to file. I felt something colder than rage. Calculation. Where are those documents now? In Ethan's briefcase. That was all I needed to know. I drove Helen to one of my hotels, an oceanfront suite I'd reserved years ago for guests, never for myself. That night, it became our shelter dot once she was safe. I began making calls. The first was to my attorney, a man I trusted more than most family. Peter, I need you awake. It's urgent, Daniel. It's Christmas Eve. Then it's the perfect night to catch snakes sleeping. I need to revoke every power of attorney my son holds immediately. Silence on the other end. Then, that's serious. Worse, within the hour, Peter was drafting emergency documents. New wills, new trusts. Full transfer of every asset to Helen under legal protection. The second call was to security. Locksmith I'd used for 20 years. Change every lock in my house tonight, I said. And install new system codes only Helen and I know. Pay is triple, bonus included. He hesitated for a moment. Christmas Eve rates, sir. Then make it a Christmas miracle. My third call was to someone who owed me a favor, a local sheriff's officer who handled private security for my resorts. Miller. I need you to listen carefully, I said. There are people in my home under false pretenses, attempting fraud. I want them removed legally and quietly before sunrise. He sighed. That's your son, right? Not tonight, he isn't. I spent the rest of the night gathering proof. From the shadows of the garden, I recorded every voice, every incriminating word. Lydia laughed as she whispered, once Helen signs tomorrow, the house is ours. And Daniel? He'll never see it coming. Her arrogance was poetic dot by the time the first light touched the sea. I had everything, videos, recordings, and a kind of evidence that didn't just destroy lies. It buried them dot as I watched the sunrise from my car, parked across the street from my own house. I felt no rage, only precision. This wasn't vengeance for pain. This was justice for betrayal. And justice, when executed properly, doesn't shout dot, it whispers. By the next sunrise, my son would wake to a new reality, one where the house he tried to steal no longer belonged to him, but to the woman he conspired against. The sky was still tinted silver when I stood before my own front door again, this time not as a homeowner returning, but as a man reclaiming what was stolen. Behind me, 2 patrol cars waited quietly. Officer Miller stepped forward, reviewing the documents I'd handed him, revocation papers, trust transfers, signed wills, and recorded proof of the conspiracy. Are you sure you want to do this, Daniel? He asked one last time. I'm not doing this out of anger, I said. I'm doing it because I have to. He nodded. Then let's do it right. I knocked. 3 firm hits that echoed through the house. Inside, footsteps shuffled. A voice muttered. Then the door cracked open, revealing Ethan, my son, barefoot, disheveled, his confusion melting into shock. Dad, what's going on? Why are the police here? Miller's tone was measured, professional. Mr. Ethan Ross, this property is under legal dispute. You and all current occupants are required to vacate immediately. Vacate? This is my parents' house. Ethan stammered. Correction, I said calmly. It's my wife's house now. Transferred into her trust as of 4 this morning. You no longer have any legal claim to it. Lydia appeared next, wrapped in silk and entitlement. Her voice cracked like glass. You can't just come here and throw us out. Ethan has rights. I met her eyes. He had rights. He traded them for greed. I motioned to Officer Miller, who handed her a copy of the official filings. This, I said, is the law you ignored. And this, I held up my phone. Playing the recording where she bragged about taking the house is the proof of what you did. Her face went pale. Lydia's father appeared behind her, trying to salvage the scene with forced calm. Daniel, surely we can discuss this privately, like adults. There's nothing to discuss. I said, you conspired in my home? You pressured my wife. You celebrated my supposed absence. And now you will pack your things, leave, and never set foot on this property again. Ethan's voice cracked. Dad, please. It wasn't like that. I cut him off. It was exactly like that. I heard it with my own ears. Silence. Then tears filled his eyes. But I'd seen crocodile tears before from men trying to save their own pride. Officer, I said, stepping back. They have 30 minutes. Only personal belongings. Everything else stays. Miller hesitated. You sure? Absolutely. The next half hour unfolded like a slow, painful exorcism. Boxes slammed shut. Suitcases rolled across the floor. Lydia barked orders while Ethan stood frozen, hollow-eyed, holding their 2 children who didn't understand why. Christmas morning suddenly felt like a nightmare. Helen stood beside me in the doorway. Silent, dignified, trembling, but not from fear. From release. When Lydia passed us with her suitcase, she muttered, "This isn't over." I looked her straight in the eye. It was over the moment you mistook kindness for weakness. Finally, the last car pulled out of the driveway. The police escort followed until the taillights vanished down the coastal road. Miller turned to me. I hope you know this will change things permanently between you and your son. It already did, I said. This just made it honest. When the house was empty, I stepped inside. The silence was deafening. Empty wine glasses littered the table. Half-eaten food rotted under the glow of golden lights. The air still carried their perfume, blend of greed and false joy. I cleaned everything myself. Every glass, every plate. I wanted to erase their presence, to reclaim the house, not through noise, but through order. When Helen finally joined me, her eyes were red from crying. What happens now? She asked. Now, I said quietly, we live in peace. And we make sure no one ever treats you like a guest in your own home again. She nodded, but I could see it in her face relief tangled with heartbreak. Because, for all the justice done, a mother had still lost her son. And though I had destroyed the conspiracy, I couldn't destroy the ache that came with it. That night, as we sat together in the quiet house, Helen whispered, You didn't just protect me tonight. You protected the truth. Maybe so. But truth always demands a price. I thought the war was over once I reclaimed my home. But real revenge doesn't end when you win. It ends when the ones who betrayed you finally learn why they lost. The morning after the eviction. The house was silent too. Silent. No laughter. No footsteps. Just the soft hum of the heater and the distant whisper of the sea. For the first time in years, it was ours again. But peace can feel heavy when it's built on ashes. Helen moved through the room slowly, almost reverently, touching walls as if rediscovering her own home. I followed her to the balcony, the same balcony where I had found her crying days earlier. The ocean stretched endlessly, calm and cruel, like it knew everything but judged nothing. Did we do the right thing? She asked softly. I turned toward her. We did what had to be done. She looked down at her hands. He's still our son, Daniel, no matter what he did. I exhaled. A son who plots against his mother stops being his son. He becomes a stranger with familiar eyes. She nodded, but tears formed anyway. That's the thing about love. It doesn't vanish just because logic says it should. Over the next few days, messages started coming in. Some from Ethan furious at first, calling me heartless. Then from Lydia's parents threatening lawsuits, claiming emotional distress, and later from Lydia herself pleading, then bargaining, then pretending to be remorseful. I ignored them all. Justice doesn't negotiate, but Helen wasn't as strong. She'd wake at night, scrolling through old photos, birthdays, graduations, tiny moments frozen before the decay began. He used to be so kind, she whispered once. He used to make you laugh. He also tried to steal the house where those pictures were taken. I reminded her quietly. She didn't answer, just turned away, shoulders shaking. A week passed. Then one morning, my assistant buzzed the intercom at the hotel. Mr. Ross, your son is here. Should I have security escort him out? For a long time, I said nothing. Then I whispered, no, let him in. When Ethan walked into my office, he didn't look like the confident man from those parties. His face was drawn, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He sat down without being asked. Dad, he started, voice low. I need to talk. I studied him for a moment. Then talk. He swallowed hard. I know what I did was wrong. I don't have excuses. I don't even know why I let it get that far. You don't know? I said quietly. Then let me help you remember. You wanted control. You wanted what you didn't earn. And when your mother refused, you tried to break her. He looked down, shame flooding his face. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Lydia, she pushed. I slammed my hand on the desk. Stop blaming Lydia. You're not a child, Ethan. You had choices. You made yours? He flinched, but didn't argue. You're right. I did. And I'm sorry. Sorry, I repeated. Do you know how many men I've heard say that in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in funerals? Sorry after the damage is done means nothing. He nodded slowly. Then don't forgive me. Just let me prove I can change. Prove? I leaned forward. You had a lifetime to prove it. I paid for your education, your homes, your failures. And you repaid me with betrayal. You broke your mother's heart, Ethan, and that is something I will never forgive easily. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just sat there, shoulders heavy. Then give me time. I'll earn it, however long it takes. I stared at him for a long while before speaking again. 5 years, I said, finally. No money, no inheritance, no contact unless I initiate it. Build your life without me. Prove that you can survive without my wallet. Then we'll see if there's anything left to rebuild. He nodded, tears finally escaping. 5 years, he whispered. I'll do it. He stood to leave but paused at the door. Tell Mom I love her. I didn't respond. When the door closed, I sat in the quiet for a long time, staring out at the ocean through the window. I'd expected satisfaction-vindication. Instead. I felt something closer to mourning, because winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like burying something you once loved. I thought the story ended there with justice served and a family shattered. But years later, the same son I cast out returned. Not for forgiveness, but for redemption. 5 years, that was the time I gave him. 5 years to rebuild a life without my money. My name or my protection. At first, I didn't think he'd make it a year. But time has a strange way of humbling even the proudest hearts. Helen heard whispers before. I did friends of friends who mentioned seeing Ethan working at a small architecture firm. Not as a partner, not even as a senior designer, but as a junior associate taking orders, staying late, starting from the bottom. It wasn't the life he dreamed of, but maybe it was the life he needed. A year later, Helen received a letter. No demands. No apologies laced with manipulation. Just honesty. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying. The kids ask about you and Dad, and I tell them you're good people who deserve better than the son they had. I hope one day, when they're older, I can tell them the full truth. I love you. Ethan. Helen cried for hours reading it. When she handed me the letter, I said nothing. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. I felt stillness. 2 years passed. Another call came, this time from an old business acquaintance who happened to own the firm Ethan worked at. Daniel, he said, I thought you should know your son's not the same man he used to be. He's quiet, hardworking. He refused a promotion last month because he said he wasn't ready. Said he still needed to learn more before leading others. That humility, that word I thought I'd never hear connected to his name, stirred something. I'd buried deep, but I didn't reach out. Not yet. Redemption isn't declared. It's demonstrated by the third year. I decided to test him. Quietly. Through a shell company, I offered him a major project, a boutique resort design worth more money than he'd seen in his entire career. The contract included one hidden clause, a loophole that allowed the client to change terms at will. A trap to see if he'd sign out of desperation. He didn't. He sent it back with notes, polite but firm. Greater than Clause 14 needs revision. I can't agree to a contract that allows unilateral change without objective standards. If that's a deal breaker, I'll withdraw. That was the moment I knew. The boy who once signed away integrity for convenience had become a man who valued fairness over opportunity. 3 months later, when he delivered the final design, a masterpiece of glass, light, and restraint, I decided it was time. I requested a meeting under the guise of the client. When Ethan walked into the conference room and saw me sitting there, time seemed to stop. His breath caught. His portfolio slipped from his hands. Sit down, I said quietly. He did. I've been watching, I told him. Not your failures, your choices. The way you've worked. The way you've changed. He looked me in the eyes, tears glinting. I didn't do it to impress you. I didn't even know you were watching. That's why it matters, I said. We talked for 2 hours about work, about life, about the kids who barely remembered us, but still asked about Grandma Helen. And for the first time in years, I saw not the arrogant man who betrayed me, but the son I once hoped he'd become, scarred, matured, and finally human. I extended my hand across the table. You're not forgiven, I said, but you're no longer condemned. That's a start. He nodded, crying openly now. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, I said. But sometimes mercy is the hardest form of revenge. That night, I told Helen everything. She didn't speak. She just cried quietly, then whispered, Can we see him? A week later, we did through a video call. Ethan sat in a modest apartment, his children at his side. They were older now, shy, but smiling. When they called us Grandma and Grandpa for the first time, Helen broke down completely. That call turned into another. Then visits. Then, eventually, a reunion not perfect, but honest. 5 years to the day after I threw him out, Ethan stood in our living room again. Not as an intruder, but as a guest. He looked around, eyes glistening. You kept everything the same. No, I said softly. Everything's different. Because we are... He smiled, and for once, it wasn't the smile of a man expecting something. It was the smile of a son grateful just to be allowed in. That night, on the same balcony where Helen once cried alone. We stewed together watching the ocean dot 5 years of distance. 5 years of pain. And yet, somehow, what survived was stronger. Because revenge, when done with patience, doesn't destroy, it transforms. Sometimes, love needs distance. Trust needs destruction. And redemption, it demands years of silence before it dares to speak again. This was my story, not of revenge alone, but of rebirth.